guys, it's Super Kozak and welcome back to my YouTube channel. If you're new here, my name is Kozak. I'm an aspiring author of dark urban fantasy and contemporary fiction and also an author tuber. I make videos about the writer experience, specifically my dumpster fire of a writer experience, and occasionally I make advice videos that I am not qualified to do. Today's video is the long-awaited conclusion to my Ukraine travel vlogs. So as I was editing, I thought originally that it was going to be 2 more parts, so part 2 and 3, since I've already done part 1. But as I was editing, everything was fitting together okay, so I decided just to do it in one final part 2. So this will be the rest of my trip, what you're about to see. Just as a warning, a couple of the days I didn't take any pictures because I was in a museum or something similar, and I'm the type of person that when I go in the museum, I just want to be in the moment and enjoy everything and not think about taking a picture or vlogging or taking a video or whatever. So that's why there's no pictures for that. But I'll talk about the experience afterwards, so you'll kind of get filled in on it. All right, I'll stop babbling. You guys can watch my footage from Ukraine, and then I'll talk a little bit about what I did, my impressions, and that sort of thing. Enjoy. Alright, I hope you enjoyed my very unprofessional amateur footage from my trip to Ukraine. Once again, I have my trusty journal to help me jog my memory so that I can kind of discuss everything that happened in that second part that you just watched. So if at any point I'm looking down, it's because I'm reading this journal, not studying the carpet. So day 6, we actually went to Kyiv-Pecherska Lavra, which is a collection of monasteries and kind of underground tunnels, catacombs sort of things, but we don't have any pictures from that because you're not supposed to take pictures or video there. But you can Google it online. It's just, you can literally Google Kiev Monastery Caves and it'll probably come up if you don't want to attempt to spell Kyiv-Pecherska Lavra. It was a really cool experience and very enlightening because I personally am not Eastern Orthodox, so it was just very new and different for me to experience Christian worship from their perspective. The second and I guess third things we did was World War II memorials, followed by the actual World War II museum. World War II, also known as the Great Patriotic War in the former Soviet Union, is an incredibly important event to the people over there. You can see reminders of it everywhere, different memorials. It's part of their cinema, their literature, and all that sort of thing, just because it had such a huge effect on their lives, because so many people died. It really affected the generations that came after. One thing that was really interesting about the World War II Museum is that the front hall where you initially enter the museum was not a World War II exhibit. It was actually an exhibit dedicated to the current conflict on the eastern part of Ukraine, which is between Ukrainian forces and separatist forces, which are also accused of being either literally aided by Russian forces or at least financially aided by the Russians. So it was interesting. They had all these little boxes with plaques that were dedicated to a specific soldier or volunteer that went over there and was killed in action, and there were some of their personal effects in each box. So it was just very raw and kind of heartbreaking to look at the pictures of all these mostly young men who probably had families and dreams and things that they wanted to do in life, and yet they gave everything for the defense of their country from this separatist movement and most likely the Russians. The museum was really beautifully put together. It was a little difficult for me to follow just because all of the plaques and inscriptions were in Ukrainian, since they're in kind of a nationalist movement right now, so they're very focused on the Ukrainian language. I was able to muddle through a lot of it, and I ended up focusing on plaques that were dedicated to women in World War II, just because it was easier to just narrow it down and focus my energy on one thing rather than exhausting myself trying to read every plaque in Ukrainian. Overall, great experience. One of the best World War II exhibits I've ever seen, but I'm a little biased because obviously I care a lot about the Eastern Front of World War II. So the 7th day was actually a Sunday. I was supposed to go to church but didn't make it because I slept in. My travel companion and I ended up going to St. Andrew's Church and then Andreevsky Spusk, which is St. Andrew's Descent, which is basically the most touristy area you can go to in Kyiv, because literally it's this street that kind of descends down a hill, and it's just lined with cart after cart after cart of vendors selling souvenirs. So it's a really great place to go for souvenirs and all of that sort of thing, because a lot of the vendors will have similar items, so they're kind of trying to compete with each other to get customers. So they do, in my opinion, have reasonable prices, but of course that was my first time in Ukraine, so I'm not an expert on what the perfect bargain price is for everything. But Andreevsky Spusk is a must-see place if you ever go to Kyiv. The church itself was very beautiful. You couldn't go inside, but the exterior was lovely. Here is a little picture they gave us kind of as a keepsake. On day 8, I went to St. Sophia's Cathedral by myself. You saw it in the video. It's very, very beautiful. I also got to go inside, which I couldn't take pictures of like they usually do at most of their cathedrals, but it was really gorgeous interior, lovely experience. They had a small museum inside the church as well, which was interesting, and that was also very enjoyable and very informational. Informative, that was the word I was looking for. Nothing really happened. Day 9, we tried to go to a museum that was actually closed. Once again, things in Kyiv and in Ukraine in general aren't updated very often on their websites, and if they are, it's usually in Ukrainian. So if you don't speak Ukrainian and if you aren't familiar with how they run their website, it's hard to find out whether or not something's closed temporarily, for example. So keep that in mind if you ever travel to Kyiv. Day 9 was the National Museum of Art. I didn't take any pictures, of course, because it was a museum. It was really beautiful. My favorite artwork was appreciating the pieces that focused on Ukrainian peasantry and nationalism. I thought those were really enjoyable and just gave a nice glimpse into Ukrainian culture. Day 11, we went to a small church, which I don't think was actually much of a tourist area. It just was one of the smaller cathedrals / churches in Kyiv, and there were actually like services and stuff going on in there, and it didn't present itself as a tourist attraction either. After that, we walked around Taras Shevchenko Park, which was like across the street from this church, and it was a really beautiful park, and it was just fun to see all these like young families walking around pushing strollers with their little kids. And I don't know, Kyiv just has a really nice feel to it. Like, even though it is a big city and it's very busy, it feels very family friendly because they have a lot of little parks and playgrounds and areas for families. Day 12, we tried to go to a Catholic church, but it was closed for some sort of renovations, just like a lot of things in Kyiv are being renovated, but the exterior was very beautiful, as you can see from the video. Day 13, we went to the LDS temple, which is on the outskirts of Kyiv. I am, in fact, a member of the LDS church, so it was a very special experience for me. And even if you're not a member, I think you can see from those photos and videos in my little compilation that it's a very, very beautiful building, and the grounds are exquisite and very well maintained. Day 14 was a pretty low-key day. I went to church and then went out to dinner with my traveling companion, and it was just overall a relaxing kind of recharge day, which I think both of us needed. Days 15 and 16 was just a lot of shopping and going to sites we had already seen, so nothing to report from those 2 days. Day 17 was one of my favorite days in Kyiv because we went to the Chernobyl Museum. Now, at first, I wasn't expecting anything special. I thought it'd be a pretty small, nondescript museum, but it was honestly the coolest museum we went to while we were in Kyiv. The exhibits were really interestingly set up. They had like this kind of eerie atmosphere at the beginning of the exhibit where it kind of dealt with the meltdown and the confusion of the initial disaster. And it was just really well done, and I learned a lot. Once again, I didn't take any pictures or video, especially because I was just so enthralled in the museum. If you are ever in Kyiv, this is one of the places I highly, highly, highly recommend you go to, just because it was so eye-opening, and I don't want to say life-changing because that's a little melodramatic, but as close to that as you can come without being over the top, if that makes sense. Really, really interesting museum. On day 18, we went to the Founders of Kyiv Monument, which is actually situated right on the shore of the Dnieper River. The view along the river is just gorgeous because you can see all these amazing bridges going across the river connecting the left and right banks of Kyiv together, and then you can see the skyline, all the buildings, the little cathedrals poke out everywhere, and it's just the coolest view. Absolutely gorgeous. And it was really interesting because from the Founders of Kyiv Monument, if you turned and looked up the hill, so away from the river, the Motherland Monument, which is that big statue on the World War II museum part, where she's got her shield and her sword, and she's just looking down like she's about to freaking kill you, and she's just up there looking down at you while you're over at the Founders of Kyiv Monument. I love that statue. It is so cool. The Founders of Kyiv Monument is also a really pretty statue. If you're interested about the history of Kyiv, you can kind of look up that story. It's folklore and possibly got some truth in it, but I think it's mostly like a legend, but it's still a really cool story. On day 19, the final day in Kyiv, we went to the People's Friendship Arch. It's got a really interesting background story because it was kind of, I guess, a gift from Russia to Ukraine shortly after the wall came down and the Soviet Union fell. I guess Russia and the other countries of the former Soviet Union were trying to figure out their relationship with other countries and figure out where they stood in the world, and so I guess Russia and Ukraine were trying to still maintain some sort of alliance / friendship, however you want to say it. But it's just really interesting now because the relationship between Russia and Ukraine is very, very bad. So there's actually pro-Ukrainian graffiti on that monument now. So I don't think it serves its original intention. So that's the whole experience. Once again, I just want to say I loved Kyiv. That was one of the coolest experiences of my life, excluding, of course, my wedding day and my daughter being born. But if you ever even have the smallest chance to go to Kyiv or just to go to Ukraine, seize it, go. You will enjoy it. You will learn so much, and you will just gain so many useful and important impressions from the country, from the people, from the history. It's amazing. I love Ukraine. I hope I can go back someday. That's it for this video. If you have any questions about my trip in Ukraine, let me know down in the comments. If you enjoyed the video, hit that like button so I know. If you want to see more content from me, writing related videos, possibly more videos about my obsession with Eastern Europe, subscribe to my channel. If you have an AuthorTube channel and you want me to go follow you, let me know down in the comments below. As always, thanks for watching and happy writing. Bye!